Welcome to another episode of Big Risk Energy. I'm your host, Roei Samuel. I'm a serial entrepreneur, having founded multiple businesses, including one that I sold to a gaming company in 2018. I've been an investor for the last 5 years, and I'm super passionate about mental health and neurodiversity, suffering with severe ADHD and dyslexia myself. And on this show, we talk to an amazing range of people, from academics to actors, entrepreneurs to investors, politicians, musicians, scientists, and everyone in between. And we talk to these people about risk they've taken in their lives, risk they've taken in their careers, when they paid off and when they didn't. And on today's show, I'm blessed to be joined by Georgia St. John Smith. Georgia is an entrepreneur, she's a mindset expert, and we're really pleased to have her today. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
You are welcome, thank you for inviting me.
So, we were having a really interesting conversation just before the show started about different types of human composition. How do you describe it? Human design?
Human design, yeah.
Okay, so I want to get into that, but you started off taking a very big risk very early on, which I find really interesting because you were incredibly successful in a short-term career in the corporate world and then threw it all away. So tell us about that.
I think for some reason, I think it's just like in my nature. It taught me so much. Like I taught myself how I learned that I could create something incredible and I could make money and I could sign contracts with people and I could do that. I was capable of that. So I think what that career taught me was how to be like successful, I guess, what you would say, in some elements. But yeah, I didn't want it anymore. I got to a stage where I was like, I think this is it. When you're in like a corporate environment and you can see what's working and what isn't, like I had that perspective where I was like, we could do things so much better. And I was saying to people like, we have to change this. We have to do things differently. But when you've always done something a certain way, especially in businesses are so prone to saying, oh, we've always done it this way. You know, we know this works. This is what works. This is how you have to do it. That it just like was like inner turmoil within me. I wanted to create this change, but I didn't really have the space to. It's like we were talking about boxes earlier. Mm-hmm. It's like I was in this corporate box and I was like, why don't we just open this lid? And they were like, no, we've always had the lid on the box. So that really drove me to be like, I can't stay here.
And do you see this as an increasing trend? Because I see more and more young entrepreneurs who are maybe making good money, they've got loads of different options open to them, but if they're not feeling like they can make impact, if they're not feeling like they can really see an identity for themselves within these corporate structures, it doesn't matter actually how much money they might be making, because for different psychological types, that's what they need. Are you seeing that as a trend as well? And I think you're also inspiring a lot of people to do that too.
Yeah, this is it. I think it's a shame that we feel like the only way we can have that creative freedom is to go off and start on our own. I think in some aspects it's amazing because it can be like your mission. Like I feel like I've got a really strong mission in this world and I do that through my business, and that's really the only way that I can do that. Whereas I feel like a lot of other people, you know, they don't necessarily want to be entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Not everyone does, and there's a lot that comes along with it that it doesn't suit everyone, and we don't all have to be that. But the problem is especially in big corporations who are same, is they're killing themselves because they're trying to grip on to an old way that just doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And so they're complaining about, you know, businesses all the time complaining about employee retention and Gen Z generation are quitting so much. Yeah, too right, they're quitting. Yeah. They're quitting your organization because it needs to change.
Yeah, 100%. If you can't give people a why or a mission, and in some cases even more than that, you shouldn't have a right to expect they're going to stay, right? So it's a really interesting one. One of the things that I think, you know, you're alluding to there, which I've always been fascinated by, is there are so many narratives in life. And really we can choose any narrative we want. For some people it's being an entrepreneur, and I totally agree with you. It's not for everyone, it shouldn't be for everyone. You need to be a certain type of psychopathic masochist to enjoy being an entrepreneur for sure. But I think, you know, growing up in the UK, especially growing up in London, your default narrative is consumerism, corporate, earn loads of money. And then it takes some people till 40, 50 years old to realize actually life's not about that. There's so much more. And you could choose, you know, you could decide to fly to Ibiza tomorrow and start something, which you did. So how aware of you were you about choosing different narratives and just knowing that, well, actually, I can just do this? Was that a difficult thing? Was that a scary thing? Because it wasn't just, I'm quitting my job and going to work somewhere else. I'm packing up and starting a new life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was curious. And this is, I think, the key to living a life on your terms, how you want it, is you have to be curious. And I think this world, like you're saying, like consumerism, careers, like we have this narrative, like go to school, go to university, get good grades, get a job, buy a house, marry someone, die. Like it's just this whole thing. And it's like, I've been contemplating this a lot recently, because I've been like, what is this end game that we're all searching for? And it's actually a really good question to ask myself, and for entrepreneurs to ask themselves as well. It's like, what is your end game? Why are you doing this? Because actually, I think what I've realized is there is no end game. In the end, we die, that's it.
Yeah.
So then it's like, okay, so with everything that I'm doing, yeah, I can have this big vision for the future, but am I enjoying it? And that's why it's so sad to see. This is what I find so sad, and this is what I want to change. It's so sad for me to see, like, a lot of my friends are entrepreneurs, and to see them like grafting away because they just want to be the next Elon Musk. And I'm like, but why? And I don't know. And they don't know. And then when they ask themselves why, it's like there's this cutting thing inside of them that is hard to face. And this is why I said to you earlier about, I hate the word wellness. It's like greenwashing, but wellness washing, like self-care. Because it's the strongest thing you can ever do, is to look inwards at that stuff that cuts you up. And like, really, it's the stuff that how we grew up, it's in our childhood, it's the I'm not good enough, it's the stories that we all tell ourselves every single day. And to then look at that is like, that's resilience. And if you can do that, you've got resilience. And if a workforce can do it, they've got resilience. And then if our whole communities and world could do that, then we're a resilient world that's actually look at things differently.
So it's a really fascinating point about this motivation, this feeling that people have inside that I need to do this because of X. And I completely agree with you that at least 99% of the time, it's because of trauma, it's because of childhood, unresolved issues that really drive us to do the things that we want to do. But I know a lot of successful people, and spoken to a lot on this show, who sometimes they're scared. They're scared to do that that internal self-searching and that seeking for answers, because it's like, I know that I have a ton of unresolved issues, but the formula seems to be working right now. I'm scared about taking my foot off the pedal. I'm scared about, well, actually, if I get better, if I actually do this, am I going to be as effective? Am I going to be as ruthless? So with what you're doing now, with getting people to ask those questions, getting people to do that internal searching, how do you approach that?
Yeah, it's scary. It's the scariest thing you can do. And I get it all the time. Honestly, I always have these incredible conversations, like business leaders, entrepreneurs, they're doing incredible stuff. But then when I have a conversation, I look at them, I see them for who they really are. And then they feel like they can open up, and I say, look, is this something you want to work on? Like, do you want to see how far you could get with this stuff and this mindset stuff, and see how far you could really go and feel good during this process? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, let's look at it then. And they're like, I'm scared. Okay. But what I do, what really helps me, and it was actually a good friend of mine, it really helps to have good people around you. But a good friend of mine said to me, he was like, Georgia, every single decision we will ever make will come from either one of two things. And it's either fear or love. And so then I asked myself, every decision I make, everything I'm doing, I'm like, am I making this decision? Am I doing this thing out of fear? Or am I doing it out of love? And then I choose. You can choose fear if you want. You can live your whole life choosing fear, and that's okay. Or you can choose love. And that's sometimes harder, but it is stronger, and it will create the life that you want, the way you want to feel every day, not the way you think you should.
So now when people are facing a lot of existentialism about what the future holds, where they stand in life. How do you, because I think as a CEO, as a founder, even as like a business leader, you're in a position to have a bit more agency, right? You can make decisions in a positive way for yourself because you're empowered to do so. How do you apply those down to people who do feel trapped because they're not a CEO? You know, maybe they're at the bottom of the corporate ladder. How do you, help, even if not directly, how do these messages help those people? How do they take those motivators, that fear and that love, and make a change in their lives?
I think it's by realizing that you do have the power. You don't have to have a label or a title to have power. And I think this is what it's quite misconstrued in society. We're all powerful. Every single one of us is powerful. And some people know it and they use that for bad. And some people know it and they use it for good. And other people just walk around not knowing how amazingly powerful they are. And so if I can show someone and work with them for them to see how powerful they are, then they know that they are powerful. They can make these decisions. It's stories. You have to break the stories. I
actually love that. And I do agree with you that anyone is capable of anything. It really is self-belief. As such an important part of people's journey, and a lot of the time people need to see it to believe it as well. I think it's why it's so important to elevate different voices, different people, because a lot of people need to have that. For me, I know that this is a weird thing to say, but like every time I've taken a really big physical risk, I want to see someone else do it first. Like every time I've bungee jumped, every time I've skydived, I'm going second. I don't want to be waiting around because I'm going to bottle it, but I don't want to go first. So, and I know that's a really primal way of looking at it, but I think it is, people do need to hear these stories, as you said, that people do need to shine a light on that path to say that everyone, and I think a lot of businesses are going to really struggle once people wake up to the realization that they can go and do the things they want to do. And now with the way that technology has empowered so many people to make money, if it's crypto, if it's building art, if it's online, whatever it might be, I think a lot of traditional businesses are going to suffer.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely. Fuck 'em.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
I'm seeing it already and I'm like, yes. Because it's like, you have to see that suffering of these big businesses who are not changing for things to change and to put the power back into the people. So funny when I said power to the people, but it's like, that's what it is.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. And going back to people, mentioned it before, human design. Tell me a bit about that, because I think on this show, obviously we're obsessed with risk and risk that people take and risk that people don't take. How does the human design theory play into people's aversion or attraction to risk?
I think when you know more about yourself, you can take risks that feel good without worrying about it. I think this is it. I often will make decisions or take risks, and I've done it a lot recently. Like I've been really tested to make these decisions and take these risks. But because I know myself and I know how I operate, it doesn't feel like so much of a risk. At all. And this is what it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning. It's like about being curious. It's like, okay, if you can really know yourself, look inward and know yourself so much, then taking these risks is like, I don't know, it feels like a game to me sometimes. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to, like I've had big moments of, I've been offered a lot of money in investment for my business. And I've had that moment where I'm like, if I was to look at myself a couple of years ago, I would have said, go on, Georgia, take that money. That's so much money for your business, for your baby, for your dream, take it. But then I'm looking at it, I'm like, no, this isn't it. This isn't where it should come from. It needs to come from somewhere else. It needs to be more aligned. But I can make that decision and turn down seemingly incredible opportunities because I know myself so well. And human design is one of many ways to know yourself. It's like human design, meditation, introspection, journaling, all of these things that I guess people can see it as meditation's a waste of time. Which
I don't believe.
But some people do, a lot of the people I talk to do.
Yeah, it tends to be quite old school.
No, even even...
Really?
Well, actually, I think a lot of people can value meditation and think, oh yeah, meditation's great. But then like, I can't do it. I struggle. No, I can't sit still. Never gonna sit still, you know. And it's like, okay, like if you want to keep choosing that, again, ask yourself, is that fear or love? But I think if you know yourself, you take risks, and it doesn't even feel so much like a risk.
So tell us about that. So you had because I remember seeing this on LinkedIn. I think this is something which got a load of traction, got a lot of positive and negative reactions as well, which I've had many times myself, but I think that's also one of the risks of putting yourself out there, right? Is, people will take from things whatever you want. I posted something on LinkedIn about a year ago about my work-life balance, and I got torn apart by people being like, this is irresponsible, this is, you're glorifying hustle culture and grind culture and all these things, where I was just being very real about actually what... This is me, exactly that. And in the same way that you are being. So tell us about that. But I'm also interested in, understanding the risks of posting about these things, the consequences.
Yeah.
So let's dive into it. Tell us the story.
The story of what?
Well, I guess first the investment turning down, and why you made that decision, but then also the risks of posting about it, and the outcomes of that as well.
Yeah, I think actually posting about things and putting yourself out there, I think it's really interesting actually, because a lot of founders and CEOs are really, and in general people are really like, I want to have a personal brand. And it's like, okay, you can have a personal brand, but you need to know what's going to come along with that. Because if it works like you want it to work, you are going to get positive and negative, because we're surrounded by that. So I think I learned that along the way, and a lot of it through that post, but also other ones where, again, like it really helped me. I'm like, thank God I have this like system and these methods I can use to check in with myself, to look after myself. So if I didn't, some of those comments would tear me apart, and it would make me want to quit, and it would make me like self-destruct or turn me into like a depressive phase. And I hear so many stories like that. So I'm like, that's really important.
You've got to be very conscious of it.
It's like, look after yourself, make sure you have a good support network, and really protect your energy around that. But yeah, the actual story, I mean, I'm learning a lot. I think you do when you just put yourself out there and you do these things. But yeah, ultimately, it was an investment opportunity that involved quite a lot. It was, I think, part of the big vision for Sancti and for what I want to do with the retreats. And things happened and in a certain order that when I tell the story, I'm like, whoa, like how did that even happen?
That's interesting.
Like I was planning this retreat, but it was like a last minute one, and there was like no villas available. And so I'd contacted all these villas in Ibiza, and like they were all like, no, fully booked, done. But then a few weeks later, when I was just about to be like, oh, maybe we won't be able to do it, one of them came back to me and was like, oh yeah, we've had a cancellation.
Okay.
So you can do your retreat. I was like, oh, okay, great.
Nice.
So I took it. And then I was working in this like co-working space in Ibiza, and I was sat there, and I didn't even want to go in that day. I don't know why I went to this co-working space, but for some reason I did, even though I didn't want to. Like, I don't have to, but I just did. I was like, I just sat myself down, sat in a different place to normal. I was working, and I overheard this conversation where this woman was talking quite enthusiastically about property in Ibiza.
Okay.
So my ears pricked up, and I was like, property in Ibiza, this sounds cool. I don't know what came over me, but I stood up, I walked over to her, and I was like, oh, hi, like, I heard you were talking about properties in Ibiza. I'm actually looking for a retreat center. And she was like, oh, that's cool, because I've actually just had one come on the market, a retreat center. Wow. This is rare. Like in Ibiza, like you do not get like the perfect villa.
Of course. So
I was like, oh, you've got a retreat? I was like, great, okay. She was like, look, it's not on the market, but I'll send you the details, like keep it hush hush. Like, cool, fine. Got her contact details for that. And I was sitting and I was reflecting on it. And honestly, before that moment, I didn't know that that's what I wanted. I didn't even know that I wanted a retreat center until I just came out with it. I just said it. I was journaling about it, and I was writing, and I was like, I wonder if it's the same place that I've just booked my retreat for. And then a couple of hours later, I didn't even follow up with her, and she'd messaged me, and she was like, here's the brochure. I looked at it, I was like, wow, that's the place.
Crazy.
That's
it's so funny.
So I started to get things in motion, speaking with investors and being like, okay, how can we make this happen? Like, it's a golden opportunity. This sort of property let alone having a business attached to the property.
Yeah, of course.
Like it
so
was
just as a property investment, it works anyway.
yeah, massively. Like even just as a property, like it was up for like 3.8 million. Like it would have been like, give us like 2 or 3 years, you're talking like 7 or 8 million.
Right.
Like it's
So it's a no-brainer.
ridiculous.
Really.
Yeah. So I'd got in touch with someone who I'd known before, and we were talking about it, and they were like, yeah, like this is wicked, I'm really interested. And I actually only reached out to them for advice. I was like, oh, you've done investment for your business, like can you help me out? And then they were like, oh, actually, like I'd be really interested.
Okay.
So things started to align, and then it got to a point where it was like things were really happening. This was happening. And we actually got to the stage where we put the offer in, and there was also investment to go into my business, to Sancti as well.
Yeah.
So it was like a 2-part
Yeah,
investment.
yeah, understood.
And we'd spent a lot of time like talking about how this is all going to work, and we actually had a good friendship as well. So I'd like invited them to Ibiza to like see the island, because for me it's like really important that whoever is a part of the business like really gets it and really sees like what we're doing here is pretty magic. So that happened and it was great, but then things started to turn, and it was for me quite scary because I was like, oh, this isn't feeling good anymore.
Right.
It
so
turned,
as soon as you knew.
it turned from a this is so exciting to a this is all on the table now. It's all available. Why do I not feel like it's a fuck yes? And I have this thing, I'm like, if it's not fuck yes, it's a fuck no.
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, so I was meditating on this and I was asking myself like, why is this a no? Why is it? And everything that I was doing, like I like to work with oracle cards as well. I was like pulling the no
I don't know what
card.
those are.
I've got some in my bag, we can do them
Okay,
later.
cool. That's
Yeah. I pulled one and I was like, no. And like, I was just like, oh, every single thing was telling me no.
That's weird.
And then it actually happened. So there was some signs, like ultimately, I find this topic very challenging in business as a woman in business, where men can overstep the line. And ultimately it was just a case of inappropriateness, like getting too close with people who were close to me, but multiple. And a lot of people around me were saying like, I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable about this. And then something happened that was like, okay, there's absolutely no way I'm taking this money now.
Wow.
Which was a real shame. Like I still really like the person. I think they've got a lot to work on within themselves, and I understand that, but at the same time I was like, I can't have this in my business.
100%. 100%. Wow. I mean, it's an amazing story, and it's I think it just goes to show how much intuition plays a part in the way that we do things. It sounds like as soon as even there was an inkling there, you knew, as you said, it was a fuck no. And I think it's something which you can't discount is how much that intuition, that internal feeling, that picking up on things, even if they're subconsciously at an early stage, and it starts to build a picture, and you realize these things. But that must have been incredibly tough. It must have been incredibly challenging.
So
you're on the cusp of everything that you want, and it's gone. So how do you, huge risk in turning it down, although obviously the right decision, considering it was someone being inappropriate and someone who was doing the wrong thing, so obviously the right decision. But how did you pick yourself back up from that?
I just went back to my methods, and this is why I'm so grateful to have these things in my life, because no matter what happens, I know that I'm going to be all right, no matter what. And I actually asked my dad, I was like, Dad, what do you like the most about me? And he was like, your resilience and how you can overcome things. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's cool. It's a good answer. But it's something I didn't really realize until I asked him about it. Yeah. But I spent a lot of time, I took a step back. And I'm in a phase now where I'm like preparing for investment again. Okay. But I actually was like, I'm not even going to think about investment for a long time. I just want to sit here. I want to be in this, and I want to be like, really like gather myself again and be like, okay, like, this is why I'm doing this and this is what I'm going for next. So meditation helped. Yeah. Taking a step back. I came to England actually, spent some time with my family, went back, and now I'm like fire again. And that's just what happens. I think people are so scared of setbacks. Yeah, absolutely. But setbacks are like the best things ever, I think. I really do. Well, it's how we learn, right? Is when things go wrong. And I had a similar situation in my first business. I mean, very
probably very different in the way that it transpired, but I had someone who's a very, very well-known investor, but also, to be honest, known for being a shark. Okay. So it was a bit easier for me because there was never a full sense of, oh, this could be, but we had a huge offer for money on the table from someone who owns a lot of big retail brands and known for not necessarily being the best person to work with. So it was a bit of an easier choice to turn it down. But in the tough moments where it's like, shit, I could have really done with that. I could have really done with that acceleration. It is difficult, but I think those are the things that add to resilience, and especially with what you do. Having a bank of experiences where actually people who are in the position where they're going on these retreats, they really relate to that as well. Yeah. So sometimes that the ups and downs of the journey probably really help as well with what you're doing.
Yeah, I almost feel like it's like this superpower. Like I can go through stuff, but I just know that I'm always able to deal with it, in a good way, in a healthy way that feels good.
Yeah, of course. And you spoke about fear of failure. How much do you think that impacts people that you speak to in your retreats? Because for me, I think you get two types of CEOs, two types of leaders that I've seen. There's the delusional self-belief, and then there is the self-sabotage. Yeah. Things are going too well, this shouldn't be going too well, I don't deserve it. And how often do you see that? And what, do you see other types of personalities emerging?
Yeah, and you see both. I see people who have both as well.
Oh, well, they have the same.
And you can play, you can flip between the two.
Interesting.
Sometimes and I would admit that I'm probably a bit like that sometimes as well. Like sometimes I'm like amazing, like delusional level of self-belief. And then other times it's like, it's actually like self-sabotage, like you say. And I think what the most important thing is being able to like find your balance between those two, because we're humans, we're built to experience a range of emotions. And so we're built to be like sometimes really confident and sometimes not, but it's actually being able to ride that wave and I guess take the step back to look at the wave and be like, oh, I'm on that part of the wave now, and view and have that perspective. So yeah, I get a lot of people who, honestly, more often than not, the people who I think maybe you speak to and you think, oh, you've got a delusion of self-belief, when I talk to them, I see self-sabotage.
You see the other side. That's really interesting.
Yeah,
that's really interesting. But it goes back to self-awareness again. Then are you on the surge or the slip, as it were? So I think that's it's a really, really valuable point. And how, when you were going through that experience with the investor, obviously at the very early stage of feeling like something was wrong, do you ever think, was it ever a thought of, shit, am I about to get everything I want and therefore I don't want it? Was there ever that level of thought, or was it very, very clear that actually this person was just the wrong person?
Yeah, no, I want what I want.
Yeah, fine.
No, it was, but it's an interesting one because that's called the success paradox.
Okay.
I think a lot of people go through that, and I have been through that in the past, where it's like, it's a paradox of like, okay, this is what I see success to be. And then when you're really close to it, like, it's like, I see it as you're tested by like whatever you believe in. Like for me, I would call it the universe. Like the universe is going to test you. When you're super close to your goal, you're going to be really, really tested. And actually it's also to do with how your brain operates. So your brain works your beliefs are built through neural pathways.
Yep.
Right. And then when you're like, okay, I don't want to believe in this pathway that's like fear of failure anymore. So when you start to remove the fear of failure pathway and replace it with something else, failure is good and it allows me to learn, that's an amazing thing. And you can be like, there's so much hope, there's so much hope, there's so much hope. But then just as that new pathway is about to form in your brain is like, are you sure? Should we go back to this one? Are you sure? And things will happen that like really, really test you on that. And it's like being on the cusp of something, and then you have to be so aware of that.
Wow.
Because otherwise you could just fall back. But that's the part. So often when I'm talking to people and they're like super like scared of something, or like, oh, I really don't know. Like I'm like, you're so close to achieving something right now.
Yeah.
You're so close to changing what you want to change.
That's fascinating. I think this is really part of the science behind meditation as well, right? Creating new synergies and creating new neural pathways in the brain. So do you think that's why meditation plays such an important part in the way that we are able to retrain our brains and get out of that fear of failure thing into actual drive for success?
Yeah, massively. Like, it can be an amazing one in terms of like how you feel. But I think there's a bit of a misconception out there. It's like, oh, meditation, like, oh yeah, I want to be calm. But actually there's so much more that you can get from meditation. I think there's a reason why it's not spoken about, because people use it as their superpower. It is used and we don't always hear about it. And sometimes every now and again we'll listen to Will Smith say that he meditates and we'll be like, oh wait, Will Smith meditates. But we don't really get what's underneath that. But what's underneath that is his layers. So it starts off with like, no way you're going to be able to access like the pure intelligence within if you're like stressed or whatever. So you start off with like, oh God, thoughts are in my mind. This is so annoying. Why the fuck am I trying to meditate? And some people never leave that layer one.
I've struggled with layer one many, many times.
Yeah, me too. But then you get underneath that to this state of, oh, I have a new perspective. I'm starting to understand things a bit more. Then you get underneath that and like, this is where the thoughts don't necessarily go, but like you don't really notice them. It's like your thoughts are over there and you're somewhere else. And within this space is like, honestly, pure genius, pure intelligence that we all have within us and we're not accessing.
And I find that really, really fascinating because if we look at, I think it's Freud, the ego, the superego, and the id, right? It's getting through those. It's getting through those layers, right? Because so much of what we do, how we think, how we act, is determined by that superego, by those pressures from parents, from co-workers, from peers, from social media, whatever it might be, and removing that noise. And it's interesting. A lot of entrepreneurs I know, for example, and this is about to cheapen the whole thing, but will take Xanax because they actually find that, for example, taking Xanax is actually removing lots of that superego and they're no longer caring. Now, I'm not saying that's a healthy thing to do. I'm not advising anyone to take loads of Xanax, but just disclaimer that. But, it's interesting because the things that you're talking about are similar to what they've said to me about, well, actually, once you can remove that anxiety, remove the running thoughts, you can get into that place where you really understand how you feel. But maybe meditation is nature's Xanax. Maybe that's really good new marketing for meditation.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's really interesting. I've not actually heard of that before.
Yeah, I think it's probably quite niche, to be fair.
It's cool because it's like, it's this realization of like outside noise taking away from your focus.
Yeah.
But then once you realize that you have that within you and it's not external, like you can go to all sorts of things to get external gain. Yeah, you can do that your whole life, but until it's internal, the power is never within you. The power's with the Xanax. Like you have that power, and there's actually more, I believe, that you can access through doing it yourself in this way than through anything external. But that's really interesting.
No, but it makes total sense, and you are 100% right, because then it's not coming from inside; it is an external source, and it might have. Short-term versus long-term, right? It might have short-term benefits of like reducing anxiety, but it's not going to give you that long-term skill set, ability to look inside yourself and really understand those things. So I think that makes total sense. Okay, so there's a few questions I want to ask you. Not quick fire or anything, but first question is, what is the biggest risk you've ever taken and what was the outcome?
I guess it's hard to decipher which one. I'm like got my risks in my mind, and I'm toying between like obviously leaving the corporate career for something else, or the move to Ibiza. And it's a weird one because, like I said to you, like it doesn't always feel like so much of a risk to me, even though it is. So I would probably say the move to Ibiza. I think a part of me was like. So my whole mission in life is like, you can get what you want, you can create the business, the life that you want, whilst you feel good and enjoy your life in the process. That for me is the whole point. It's like, enjoy the sound of the sea, watch the sunset, spend the time with the people who you care about, have it all. Yeah. It's like the have it all vibe. Yeah. And I think by moving to Ibiza, I was like walking my own walk. And my fear of that, the risk in that was like, well, what if it doesn't work? Like, it could just not work. And it's something that I'm still, I guess, proving to myself every day. Because I thought, oh, you know, there's a lot of distractions in Ibiza. Will I become way too zen and hippie and not care about business anymore? Or will I like go on the party scene and fall off the edge?
There's definitely a lot of traps in Ibiza. Yeah.
But I really it's how it's paid off by taking that risk is like, I'm like, oh, actually no, in the peak of summer, I'm like on it, I'm on fire, like I'm doing my thing. And it's actually really helps me to be able to be like, you know what, I'm gonna go to the beach tomorrow morning, do a yoga practice, then start my day. Like that for me is life. Like that gives me life. It's like sunrise, it's sunsets, like those little things. So that's how it's paid off. It's like, it's brought a lot of self-belief in my own mission.
I actually find that actually really incredible, because one of the things that I really ascribe to is absurdism, which is a strand of existentialism, which basically says, okay, it's very difficult to know if anything means anything, right? Like we said before, what's the end game? You know, it's very difficult to actually arrive at that. And absurdism is the idea that, well, if nothing can certainly mean anything, there's two ways you can go. You can either be like, well, fuck it, because if nothing means anything, what's the point of doing anything, which is more nihilism. And then absurdism is saying, well, if nothing means anything, let's enjoy it. Let's bring peace, let's bring, you know, joy, let's lift each other up. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there's like an end game here, but it sounds like you're doing that with the life you're living, which is, you know, which is super impressive. And I think there's a lot of people who will be very jealous, possibly myself included, of, you know, being able to say, do you know what, actually, I'm going to make the most of life in terms of enjoying it day to day and feeling fulfilled day to day, rather than working to an end game, which may or may not be there.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. And people will say to me like, oh, you're so lucky. And it's like, yes, I am lucky. Like I have a certain amount of privilege that I'm really like, I'm very, very lucky. And I really see that. But then there's another part of me that's like, if you have the ability to say that to me, like you have a lot within your toolbox and your own privilege, like you can do this too. You can do whatever you want. What's your version of that, you know? Not everyone's version of that life, that absurdism life of like just enjoying it, almost like living life like it's a bonus life. Like 100%. That is like within your capability. So it's like bringing the power back to yourself. And I always say like people are mirrors, like what you see in someone else is within you. So if you see that as inspiring within me, that's within you. You've got that ability to do that yourself.
Love it. I think that's spot on. So my next question for you is there anything in life that you wish you'd done differently?
Oh, this one's a cool one. I wish that I had learned this stuff earlier, even though a lot of people are like, you're so young to learn all this stuff. Like, I really wish I'd got into meditation and yoga earlier in my life. A lot of the time I'm like, oh, I wish I started a business in uni, because like you got so much time at uni. Like I did a lot of like businessy types things at uni, but
I founded my first business during uni.
Did you?
It was definitely the right decision, I can't tell you.
This is the thing. And then another one is like really like standing up for myself in the workplace and in the corporate world. I wish I'd have had it within me to stand up for myself and to speak my truth from a really strong, centered place, rather than letting it get on top of me.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And what are you proudest of?
Oh, wow. What am I proudest of? I'm proudest of the people I have in my life. I think they're a good reflection of how far I've come. I'm surrounded by some really awesome people doing really awesome things who, I guess you could say, live this absurdism lifestyle. Like they're breaking up the rule book, doing it differently. Yeah. So
with that in mind, and I guess you get a ton of exposure to people who are at really interesting stages of life. What do you think it takes to be successful?
I think it takes the ability for you to ask yourself, what is success to me? That's what it takes. So if you don't know your own definition of success, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. I think there's, like we were talking about the narrative earlier, you know, that narrative is someone's version of success, but not everyone. It's not one size fits all. So I think if you want to be successful, you have to spend the time on, okay, what are my values? What's important to me? How do I want to show up in the world? How do I want my relationships in my life to be? That is a big indicator, I think.
It's a great answer.
Who's going to be there, like at your deathbed? Who's going to be there? What are you going to regret? Like, you have to think of these things, because we think we have all the time in the world, but like a bus could hit me tomorrow.
Yeah.
And thank God we've recorded this already.
Yeah, no, but it's a great answer, because, you know, a lot of people take their definition of success and apply it everywhere, but I agree. You know, it's all subjective.
Oh,
yeah, they do, right?
Yeah.
But it's all subjective. It's all subjective. So my last question for you is, 15-year-old Georgia walks in right now.
Right.
What are you telling her?
What am I telling her? Walk your own way. You have everything within you to do whatever you want in this life. And stand up for yourself.
Amazing. That's great. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Nice one.